Welcome to the Global Design Forum chat. Okay, so we are Global Design Forum, which is part of the London Design Festival, which has been going on for many, many years now. And we have an incredible, and my name is Suzanne Trocme, by the way, and we have some interesting people talking about the future of hospitality design. And they are Tim and Afroditi and Ed, and I'd like to introduce them, and maybe they can introduce themselves. So maybe Tim would like to go first and talk about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, my name's Tim Oulton. We have a furniture company. We started in furniture and moved into hospitality later. We have a retail store on the King's Road in Bluebird called Timothy Oulton. And we supply medium to top end furniture to most of the top global retailers. But my real desire lies in the full space. And as Afroditi said before, about entertaining people. And that's what hospitality can bring over and above normal furniture retail. So it's where my heart really lies. It's where I'd really like the company to end up, is doing the full spaces, whether it's cinema, hotel, restaurant, bar. To me, it doesn't really make any difference what the hospitality channel is. It's about entertaining people and really putting on a show and what we call epic interiors, which leads to fulfillment and enjoyment, in my opinion. So that's what we'd like.
That's the best first introduction. And Afroditi, would you like to talk about who you are and what you've done? And
of course. Hi, Suzanne. Nice to meet you all, and thanks for joining us, everybody online. My name is AfroditiKrassa. I'm the founder, director of AfroditiKrassa Studio, which is a London-based specialist hospitality design agency. So we create designs for our clients spanning across restaurants, bars, cinemas and hotels in 3 different continents. And we have specialized in hospitality design for over 18 years now, creating what we call category defining hospitality design, as in all our projects are trying to do a simple thing, which is redefine the category they're operating within, whether you're a celebrity chef such as Gordon Ramsay, or a high street operator such as Itsu, which is past clients of ours, or a mid-positioned restaurant like Dishoom, or a cinema operator like Curzon. What we do is look at the category these clients operate in and trying to use design and creativity in making them best in class and best in their category, so they have more chances of going out and being successful in what is a very challenging market. And this is becoming more and more relevant in today's market, not just because of COVID, but because hospitality has been challenged in the last 5 years for different reasons. So the market is becoming more saturated and more difficult to succeed in, and even more so now. And hopefully design can help people get to success.
Oh, thank you. And Afroditi, what I think that you do very, very, very well, and because I live in London and I see your Curzon cinemas, and I go to your cinemas and I go to your restaurants and the Itsus, you think of the end user, which is really, really interesting. You think of the last person at the you design for the end user, and I totally appreciate that.
Thank you. I think that's probably because of my training as a product designer. I was trained as a product designer rather than an architect or an interior designer. And I think in product design, you're very much trained on user experience. That's very fundamental to using a product. And when I entered the world of hospitality, which wasn't my world, I realized that a lot of perhaps other people kind of forget that the whole journey of a customer is more important than anything else. And unless you make these customers really have a great experience, they will not come back. And the experience has to be holistic. It has to be from the moment you enter all the way you exit. And it has to be beyond visual and beyond material. It has to be sensorial. It has to be about the smell, the sound, the lighting. Everything has to come together to create this perfect world, almost a curated environment, almost like a cinema director would do, and create that kind of holistic escapism from reality.
Exactly, it's cinematography, really, isn't it? I mean, in 1929,
it is in many ways.
That the crash happened in 29, then the speakeasies started to happen, and then in 2008, when we had another financial crash, then people started to think differently about hospitality and about pleasing people, and at the end of the day, it's all about. There was a Charles Dickens. Was it Little Dorrit? it was about being usefulness.
Yes.
And absolutely brilliant. And let's go to Ed now. Ed Bacchus. Ed, darling.
Great, thank you.
I call everyone darling. I'm so sorry. It's just,
Well, good morning from New York, everybody, and it's a pleasure to be with you.
So we just know Tim is in China, Aphroditi is London-based, and you're in New York. So thank you so much for joining us at this early time in the morning for you.
It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Ed Bacchus. I'm a partner with Champalmo Design, and we're a boutique design studio based in New York with a focus around luxury hospitality, restaurants and public spaces, private residential work. And our work really, well, maybe I should just start by saying that we're a studio of incredibly diverse talents, a small group of people who share a real passion around all aspects of design. And it's our sort of multidisciplinary aspect of the studio, which I think really makes our work very interesting. And we, much like what Afroditi was saying, we really do focus our work around defining rituals of experience and building design around that. And so it's there are many different ways in which we look to develop strategies that are both spatial and emotional, that feed that fuel our approach to the design of our work. I think that craft is one of the most sort of interesting aspects of what we then bring to the table as well to solve these interesting problems. And I think that there are many trends and things that we're seeing today that create new interesting design opportunities. And those are the types of things that we like to focus on and bring. So there's a bit of a sort of almost a very classical approach to our work that's based on the idea of a small scale workshop with expertise brought together, much the way that I think Tim was describing in his approach to things, and a necessary adjacency or closeness to the way in which things come together, the manufacturing side of things. We also manufacture, warehouse, and sell fabrics as part of our work. So there's a deep passion for everything from the strategy side of things down to the small detail.
Well, thank you. And what do you produce? What is your product? Tell me about. I mean, so clearly it's for hospitality, but
sure. A big focus on luxury hotels, and crafting the types of experiences that guests would experience in really wonderful remote locations. Our work spans the world. We have worked on some of the most seminal hotels and have a really wonderful group of clients that we're working with. They're all trying to navigate the present circumstances, but also think about where they want to be, in 5 to 10 years in terms of the leadership, providing thought leadership in the world of hospitality.
Mm-hmm. What does hospitality mean to you? It means how people behave and how people behave around other people. Is that right, or does it mean furniture?
No, it's.
I'm asking. I'm actually myself, and I designed for hospitality, mainly in America. And
in many ways, it's a problematic word, right? Because it also sounds like it's been taken over by industry.
Thank you. That's what I'm asking. Thank you. So I'm really challenging you right now. Okay, go on.
No, that's good. But we, our approach is really to create moments of that are built around people. Our work is known for it's a kind of casual sophistication. Mm-hmm. And one of the interesting things about working worldwide is that different societies interpret that entirely differently. Yes. And so one of the biggest challenges that we see is we actually have to act a bit as cultural anthropologists in the work that we're doing in different places to understand how people gather, the types of spaces they like to be in, types of adjacencies, and to craft and engineer social space, if you will, built around those percepts. And so it's a very it's something we love to do, and it's something we're very passionate about.
It's anthropology. It's anthropology at the end of the day.
Yeah.
When I was in Dubai and I saw the opera house being built, and I said, "My goodness, these seats are so far apart." And they said, "Well, that's because people cannot be close together." And the Emiratis have always been social distancing anyway. It was very, very interesting. Anyhow, so thank you. So Afroditi, where are you? You with us still?
Yes, of course.
Hi,
Right here.
Hi.
Hi.
So we're talking about, I mean, the mission of this program was about, within the Global Design Forum, was about the pandemic itself. So what is your vision or your idea about the pandemic with regards to how you may design going forward?
I mean,
does it affect you? Do you care?
Yes, of course we care. You know, it's unavoidable. Whether I care personally or not makes no big difference. Our clients care. I had a call yesterday with one of our clients. We're building a new vegan restaurant out in Cambridge. And the first thing she asked me is, this is opening in a few months' time. Have you considered how people will be sat during a COVID crisis? You know, how do they order the food feeling protected? So whether I care or not, you know, our clients care very dearly because they run businesses which have to operate in the current climate. Mm-hmm. I hate the word climate, by the way, everybody's using that word.
I hate all these words. I hate all of them. I hate the word.
But I
hate the word. Everything. I think the C word is.
Yes, exactly. The C word, the unmentionable C word. Yeah. But we've also got clients, you know, we're opening a new restaurant for Gordon Ramsay out in Los Angeles, which will open a year down the line. It will not open immediately. And we have to think, how has the market changed since we started planning this restaurant a year ago? And how will the locality change in a year's time? And how will this affect the way we plan the space and the user needs? The user needs are not going to be necessarily exactly as we had hoped for a year ago. They will have shifted slightly. You know, a good example of that.
One question, so Afroditi. So is it your responsibility to work out the user needs with regards to?
In our studio, it is. In other studios, it isn't.
Because, you know, at the end of the day, you are a designer. You need to design the space. But is it not the responsibility of the restaurant owners, the restaurateurs, to deal with what you're going to do next? I mean, where does the responsibility lie?
How would you design a space without knowing how the space would be used? So it's a thing you need to design together with your client. You need to define what are the exact needs. And the client might not have a clear idea what are the needs. And as a creative, you can come up with ideas that they can't even see, with solutions they can't even see. A great example of that, and maybe we're going a bit off piece from your original question, but that's fine.
It was never my intention.
You know, let's say Curtin Cinema in Victoria, which you know quite well from what you said. Yeah, was a really large space that the client didn't know what to do with it, and they said to us, "We'll use it as a studio, as a manager."
It was a big basement, basically, wasn't it?
It's not a basement; it's more like a small space adjacent to one of the auditoria, and it was something like 3 meters by 7, let's say. And they didn't know what to do with it, so they thought we'll use it as a manager's office. That's very classic client thinking. I don't know what to do with this space. I'll give it to the manager to use it as an office, and it becomes a backroom storage area. And I said to them, that's a bit of a waste, you know, why don't you come up with something more clever? And the client said, well, go and have a think and come back with something. So we came back with this tiny little screen of 10 seats, which can be booked out privately by people as a private members area, you know, where people can have their own screening, their own little bar, they can grab drinks, help themselves, take their shoes off, relax, almost like a semi-private space, well, a completely private space, almost like you're at home, but you're not at home. You're in a care zone with like amazing quality technology. The client loved it, and they're generating revenue out of this, which would have been a disused space otherwise. So you have to work together with your clients to come up with solutions. You know, I really believe that. And you have to challenge their briefs. You know, we receive briefs and we go back and we literally tear them apart and start all over. And sometimes you receive briefs where you think, actually, if I look at the current market, they make a lot of sense, but some of these ideas do not make sense. So it is a team exercise. To me, there's no delineation. You're working towards the same goal. And, you know, I'm not expecting for my client to give me everything. I'm expecting for me to question it and go back and for my team to question equally everything else and go back and redo things and restart from scratch effectively.
But are you finding, Aphrodite, at this moment that you're having an interesting time and that you're thinking differently or not? Has this time changed the way you're thinking? Or?
Absolutely. For me personally, on a personal level, and I think for my team, 100%. I don't know how it is for the people out there. I have no idea. But we have to change the way we think 100%. And that's not a bad thing. I'm the person who hates change. Everybody who knows me, I hate change more than anything. But we're forced to embrace change. And that's a great thing. You know, that's not a bad thing at all. First of all, we have to shed, we have to get rid of things, which is not a bad thing. Everybody has learned to live with more during COVID, which is not a bad thing. We're not designing spaces where we're challenging whether we need to be as visually rich as we used to be, and whether we need to shed and go back to what's really, really important and really, really necessary and really effective, but also makes people feel great. And I think design will...
Making people feel great, isn't it?
Yes.
It's making people feel, which is what hospitality is all about, isn't it?
But what was great 2 years ago,
you walk in,
we need to define what that means. What made people feel great 2 years ago might not be the same thing currently.
That's what makes people feel great tomorrow. You're right. And Tim, tell me about what makes you feel great, Tim?
Yeah, I don't know. My feeling is we're not going to change that much. Yes, there will be some, because global travel will resume. And a lot of the trends that people are talking about had started already. Experiential, that word was started coming 10 years ago. Yeah. And the people who aren't dealing in that kind of luxury are going to struggle. And it's what we kind of call humble luxury. It's about the simple materials, beautiful materials, well presented. And I can't see that changing post-COVID. I'm always trying to think of it from my personal perspective. I will definitely travel less. Having not traveled for 7 months, 8 months at all, and suddenly working out, business is still okay, kinda, I will definitely travel less myself. So I think I have to bear that in mind with other visitors, that the experiences have to be even more elevated. And Ed was right, hospitality is a tricky word. We call it hosting, whether it's fee paying or not. And there should be no difference whether it's fee paying or not. It's how you interact with another human being. And that works two ways. And so in our stores and our restaurant in Hong Kong we always focused on the service. And I don't think that's going to change post-COVID. Those trends were happening pre-COVID. They've just been fast-tracked, for want of a better word. And anyone who post-COVID in hospitality, hosting, who doesn't give a great experience is going to be in trouble. So our job as designers is going to get elevated, which may be a good thing for the trade. Yeah, it may be a good thing for the industry. Who knows? No one's got a crystal ball. Aphrodite says it's true. No one's got a crystal ball. But from our side, we're saying, don't change what we're doing. You've got to entertain the customer. You've got to knock them out. Once they cross those doors, you've got to give them something different. Otherwise, you're not going to make it. And that could be even more magnified post-COVID. I'm sure it will be. And more isolated experience.
You're not feeling negative at all about any of this, are you?
It's not negative at all. It could be a positive for the hospitality industry.
I think so too.
The great operators will do
1929, 2008, hospitality was booming when those two really bad financial situations happened. Hospitality was booming because people wanted to go out. They wanted to go out and have some fun.
And the ones who give great experience and the great operators will do well post-COVID. How long this all lasts, no one knows. No one has a crystal ball. But I think it's an exciting time for the industry because everyone is going to re-examine.
But
everyone's going to have to re-examine.
So who wants to talk now? I can see something.
I was going to say, I think it's great that we're referring to previous financial crisis, but this is beyond the financial crisis. And I think it's not about people not feeling secure financially only. There's other elements that change people's behaviors here, which we haven't experienced before. The way people feel being next to other people. Hospitality is a place to get people together, and a lot of people are not necessarily willing to be very close to each other. So it's beyond the crisis of 2008, in my opinion, and beyond 1929. And the last big pandemic, we don't have much data as to what happened immediately after. Well, I couldn't find much research as to what happened in the world of hospitality after it, although I tried to look for it. So I think we're not just faced with a financial crisis, we're faced with a whole, change of behavior from people. Whether that becomes a permanent thing or whether it's more a short-term thing, we're yet to see. We don't know that.
I think what's one of the things which is most interesting to me about this is that we've talked a little bit about the acceleration of certain types of trends, but there are certain shifts that may swing back. There was a time not so long ago when everything was focused on the idea about experience within hotels, and larger experiences, people traveling with family groups or larger groups are looking to tap into bigger experiences, and as a result there's a lot of really interesting work happening around the design of public spaces and the way that things happen. At the moment, there's much more of a tendency to look a little bit more towards comfort as a driver. And there are some really interesting opportunities and trends that are happening as a result of COVID, which I think we're all in agreement that hopefully sooner rather than later, this will be behind us and people will start to travel again and do other things. But I think that there are going to be aspects from this that are going to help recenter the discussion a little bit more around individual experiences in a way which is a little bit different. And we've seen a number of interesting responses. So we're working on projects, we're redoing, for example, Bedroots Palace in San Moritz, which is a hotel which has had a really beautiful series of experiences that happen in a common public space area, and as a result they haven't really emphasized, for example, in-room dining. So the idea is that guests there really want to go down to the public spaces and experience everything that's in that sort of realm. And one of the things that we're seeing is that as a result of the pandemic, they've changed their approach towards dining, where in-room dining now you can order anything that one could have gotten from the specialty restaurants. It's a much broader menu. And we're having to think a little bit differently about how it is that we're going to accommodate service, which is now going to be happening in the luxury space of someone's more private luxury space. So they're very interesting questions, because service is, in fact, the only real differentiator in hospitality and hotels around that sort of experience zone. So what happens when people have to come into a room? How do we design that so that we can still maintain a sense of privacy? How far is that person, do we want other people to transit the space? How do they transit the space? How do we set up for dining? And what type of furniture? How do we think differently about furniture now that we're going to want to include sort of a dining moment? And dining, as we know from the other work that we're all doing, doesn't have to be so rigid and formal. But there are opportunities that come out of this for us to craft new rituals of around these experiences and to give them a design expression. And I think that's one of the most interesting things to me about what's happening. And we're seeing it not just in the room, but in all aspects, every touch point of how people are transiting through hotels, which I think gives us an opportunity not to jettison what we've learned from the past, but to rethink it around the idea of individual experience, within the sort of group context. It's a little bit, it's a complete change of orientation, and out of it are a whole new series of opportunities. And that's, I think, those are some of the things that have really excited us in the context of the work that we're taking on now.
But Ed, may I ask you? So we're talking about ritual, which is really interesting, and how rituals behave and how they continue. But do you really think that this is because of COVID? Do you think it's because of COVID that we are seeing these new rituals? I'm not sure. I think it may be just a new way of thinking anyway, but it may not be COVID related. But you tell me, what do you think?
I do think that COVID is the accelerator for these trends. Mm-hmm. And that I think it's very likely that well, actually, I do think that COVID is driving certain trends, and I would say that again, the focus back on individual comfort over larger group settings is going to be is a bit of a pendulum swing from where things were trending previously, and maybe that pendulum was going to swing in any regard. But there are also, at many other levels, very distinct aspects of changes that will be driven by COVID that I don't think were things that we were thinking about previously. Things like automation. These were not things that were natural to the concept of luxury space. The automatic doors, faucets that you don't have to touch to operate, elevators without buttons. Those are, I think that there's a whole other aspect of things, surfaces that have to be cleanable.
Yeah. I saw a TV program the other day about offices in New York now, but the big buildings that you walk in, you don't have to touch anything, you just walk through, you just put a card in and then you walk upstairs and you don't have to touch anything on the elevator and so on and so forth. And there must be an awful lot of money being spent in these tall office buildings in New York.
Well, what's interesting, what had driven that previously was efficiency, the idea that you could make the elevator, you could make people's passage from when they first walk into the doors to when they get to their seat in their office shorter, because they're sharing elevators over very high-rise, very tall buildings. Now there's a different sort of imperative to that, right? That idea that one doesn't have to touch a door. Like the idea, is a doorman still a relevant experience? Maybe it's more relevant today than it ever was, where it was sort of a sign of kind of conspicuous consumption or something. But I think now there's a different kind of imperative around things that make it easier and are perceived as being safer for you. It creates a better emotional environment. And I think engineering that environment is going to be part of the focus that we're going to see, all of our clients are talking about right now, that we'll start to see manifested in new projects that are being built.
Okay, but just very quickly before we go into other people, how much of what you believe is around fear? And I will tell you, I lived in New York in the 1980s for 10 years when HIV came about, and we didn't know what on earth it was about. We had no idea. It was called GRID at the time, gay-related immune deficiency. And we were terrified. We had no idea of how it came about or whatever was happening. And there was fear. And I guess now with COVID, there's another fear, as there was with the ricin thing in the 90s as well. Does this affect the way your clients think about things, do you think? Or do they have fear? Or is that...
Well, I think that they certainly do, because most of them are at risk in terms of their investments and the things that they've done that they're out in the world for. So there's a rational sort of connection between that sort of perception of fear and what's happening to their bottom line. And I think that people's emotions drive our economies, right? When everyone feels good about things, there's a sort of rising tide. When people feel bad about things, it tends to fall. And I think that they're very real things that design has the ability to address. We've all walked into a room and either felt really comfortable because of the environment that's been created, or agitated, or put into a special kind of mind space that helps us experience things. And I think that these are all this is where we have, as designers, we bring our superpower, if you will, is an ability to not just contextualize these concerns, but give a design expression to whole spaces that have the ability to impact people in significant ways. And I think so, crafting spaces that make people feel comfortable, that send the right messages. We have to draw on all those aspects, things that people touch, engineering the types of interactions.
Hospitality, or whether it's within the home, right? Both.
Correct, yeah.
Correct. John Saladino once said to me, why is it that when you walk into the American interior designer, you walk into an American home and you suddenly find yourself in the middle of a conversation, he said to me. There's no hallway. You just walk you get out of the elevator and you're in a conversation, and then you're in it. It was so American and so absolutely lovely. And very, very different from Europe, where you have lots of vestibules before you go into anything. Sure. But Ed, that's brilliant. Tim, I'm sorry, we're kind of like, we're going all over the place, aren't we, really? We're meant to be concentrating on, I have to go back to my notes, Global Design Forum, the future of hospitality design. And so Tim, what do you think the future of hospitality design is at the moment? I mean, what do we do now?
Well, as I said, I don't think for us there's any big change. That our basic tenets will remain about entertaining people and hosting people and spectacular interiors. Yes, there will be a move to more natural materials. That's already started, but that has started before. And we'll just accentuate more. The bit that is going to change, I agree, that this more isolated hospitality will exist. Private rooms, in-room dining, luxury yachts will have a boom.
Yes.
You know, because the wealthy can afford, and they will want that kind of, because they can afford and they have wider options.
Yes.
So I don't think that's going to definitely happen. But it doesn't change the basics of how we approach hospitality. And humble luxury and simple materials, beautifully crafted, and comfort. I agree with that. Basic things like comfort will become more important. We do a sofa for Restoration Hardware called Cloud, which is just this big fluffy feather thing. And it was already their top seller, and it's massively up post-COVID. You know, that can't be a surprise. People are buying, they're going to buy different kind of products. I agree with that. More comfortable. That's definitely going to come, and we've just got to be aware of that as designers and provide for it.
Totally. And Aphrodite, what about you? What do you think?
I think that clients who are now planning on opening restaurants, hotels, or cinemas or bars within the current market are very bold, and they're very gutsy. And I don't think they're driven by fear. They're driven by the opposite of fear. They almost feel reckless. You know, I speak to clients and I think, I can't believe you're investing all this money to open what you're opening. And currently you have no focus as to where this market is going. So I think people who are still opening places are very, very gutsy, and that will drive innovation because they know that they cannot do things as they used to. They know they have to come up with new ideas in order to be relevant. And they're driven by questioning everything. We had a client recently saying, you know, simple things like dining on a bar counter, which has been very popular for the last 10 years, and it's been done to death. He said to me, why are we still designing restaurants which have got counter seating and counter dining? That's been done to death. Surely this is the time to come up with new ideas as to how we dine, new formats, new ways of sitting. And I said to him, this is fantastic. It's great that you're challenging and asking us to do that. And I think these are, at least in our practice, these are the kind of operators that we're seeing coming now with new ideas, because they know that they cannot go and reshape what's been around and put it back in the market. They know they have to start afresh with completely new ideas that define the future. So actually, going back to your question of fear, our current clients are not at all driven by fear. They're almost driven by the opposite. They're almost mad, you know, opening in this current scenario, which is fantastic for us because we have less projects, but the projects we're working on are more about innovation and rethinking things rather than just doing the same old again and again and again. So I think we're seeing better quality and less quantity, which is not a bad thing.
Those clients, we have to reward them with better product. Yeah, they've taken the guts to still open.
Yes. Yeah.
And as designers, we have to give them an even better product.
Yes, and I think, you know, going back to also, you know, simple things like hygiene, you know, which was the other discussion we had earlier. I think we also need to think globally. The things like sensorless taps in other parts of the world is a given, it's a standard. Just because we don't use them in Europe, it doesn't mean that it's not happening everywhere else. We've been working on a project in Hong Kong with Rosewood, the hotel operator, and the space we're designing, everything has to be on sensors. And that was pre-COVID, that had nothing to do with COVID. But you know, you're based in China, Tim. You probably know better than me. Apologies, there's a fire alarm going on in our building, in our studio. Hopefully it's not a real fire. It stopped, great. But you know, this was a given in Asia. People will not start touching and taps and expect other people to touch them afterwards. So, you know, that's not necessarily new thinking. It's just becoming more relevant. But there will be new thinking which completely changes the way we do things. I really think so. I don't think it's going to be a small shift. I think it's going to be a slightly bigger shift. And that's a great thing. I'm actually quite pleased because we're getting rid of, you know, kind of the nonsense and the gimmicks that existed in our industry for a long time.
Yeah, okay.
Over the top theatrical kind of bullshit design, excuse my language, and we're going to go back to what's essential and really great and needed, rather than, you know, people just doing things just to be like out there in social media and get clicks. And I think we're going to get rid of a lot of this nonsense, which is not a bad thing. I'm quite happy about that.
I agree with you. I think this is actually a moment where we have the opportunity for incredible innovation. And before we started, Suzanne, you mentioned this idea that this is actually a bit of a design renaissance, and I agree with that entirely. I think that there are as Afroditi had mentioned, that people are looking to substantially change their approach to things. No one wants what they open to look like what had happened before all of this started. People want to open with something that feels really relevant, yes, and thoughtful and inspiring.
Yeah.
We have this is a very interesting. There's a funny little word that we talk a lot about in the studio, which is charm. And from a design standpoint, it's just I love it as a charm.
Okay.
Just thinking about charm, and so what is it that makes a space
very quaint?
It is very quaint, and that's why I was saying in a lot of ways it's a bit problematic because it doesn't sound. You say, okay, what's the relevance of it? But the relevance is that is that at the moment it goes back to that question a little bit about comfort that we were talking about earlier, creating spaces that can create and bring out moods, create a deep sense of satisfaction. Or a deep or inspire curiosity. These are I think very interesting sort of thoughts, and they can be applied to larger scale public spaces. There's very small and intimate spaces. Redefining, for example, how one works in their home. I think that this is something which was really brought on by COVID. It certainly existed before, but we haven't thought about working from home the way that we have today, and crafting spaces where you can come into a mindset, where you can be inspired, where you can feel that you can do your best work. I think this is one of the most sort of compelling challenges to designers, and everyone needs spaces like this now more than they ever have.
It's like the Eames house, doesn't it? If you think of Charles and Ray Eames and the whole Cranbrook Academy.
Brilliant. Yeah.
And the fact that, do you know that Harry Buttier, he actually created Ray Eames's wedding ring because they were at school together. It was
That's fantastic.
So sweet. Yeah. And then they went to California, and I went to that house in 2000. I spent the year 2000 going around all the houses I hadn't seen before, like Boiling Water and all the Le Corbusier places and so on. So the whole year traveling around. And the Eames house was so beautiful and so all about people and craft and architecture and persona and all sorts of things. It was absolutely beautiful. And their daughter, I think her name was Susan, took me around. It was just divine. Everything
you had the ability to create spaces that were both sort of intimate and social, and nest them in compelling ways. And so, I think as we think about sort of what the opportunities are that exist today, what's fascinating to me is that this is not just something that people experience in a small sort of subset of space that's going to influence others. We've all globally had the same experience: work from home, yes, rethink our experiences. So this is probably the biggest common experience that we will ever have in our lifetimes, and it has the ability to impact very much how we think, how we respond to things from a design standpoint. So I think that this is really
an interesting time.
Yeah,
interesting time. Tim, you're going to say something, I think.
No, I agree. I agree with Ed on that. It is a big common experience that will never happen. It's never happened before in my lifetime, and will never happen again, hopefully, in my lifetime. And it will shape some key ideas, but for us in hospitality, we're still going to continue with our key tenet that the experience is everything. We always say people forget what you did, they forget what you said, but they will never forget the way you made them feel.
Yeah, the talisman happens. The talisman happens.
Same restaurant, hotel, nightclub, that bit doesn't change. So, and we have a waging kind of work.
It's experiential. We all have experience. That's what we remember, right?
It's going to get amplified. If you talk about the great restaurants, I can never remember what I ate, but I remember having a great night, but I don't remember the dish.
Go on, give me now your favorite restaurant experience ever. Go on. Where was it?
McDonald's, Solihull.
No. Really.
Large fries. strawberry milkshake.
Okay, cool.
I don't know. I'm not a great foodie, and people always ask, "What's your favourite restaurant?"
It doesn't need to be posh. It just, just
No,
like
obviously.
sweet. I mean, my favourite experience
On
was
yours?
well, mine was I lived in Paris. I had my first 2 kids in Paris, and we would go to Brittany. I'd take a lemon, and the oysters would come up on the shore, and we'd just have oysters with lemon. It cost me like 2p, and that was my favourite meal, actually.
I remember eating at the Ivy once, and I didn't want to go, and I wanted
The original Ivy,
and I wanted to hate it.
That one.
It was fantastic.
Yeah.
And I went determined to hate it, but it was fantastic, I have to say.
Yeah. Okay. The original one before they became all over the place. Yeah. Mm. So.
And also, the word for crisis in China is weiji, but it has a double meaning. It means crisis and opportunity. And I think that's the way we've got to view this, isn't it? The same word has double meaning. And that's the way we've got to view this. And I agree with Aphroditi. The ones who are opening restaurants are brave people, and we should support them, because the hospitality is going to have a tough run, but it will pass. This will pass.
And it's not just restaurants, though, is it? It's also casinos. I mean, Steve Wynn, not that he's there anymore, by the way. Ooh, I forgot that. But the casinos in Los Angeles and so on, and all the airports and so on. I mean, hospitality is not just restaurants, is it? It's an awful lot of other things as well. I know that because I'm actually a designer for hospitality. And in fact, Steve Wynn was my biggest client for a while. Well, it's been a wonderful, wonderful conversation around this. Have we solved the problem yet? I don't think we have we? We just want to keep going with
all
it.
Fixed. It's all done.
And Tim, by the way, I walk past the Bluebird every single day.
Don't walk past. Go in with your credit card.
Yeah, and I don't have a credit card, honey. I don't even have keys to my house.
Well, go in anyway. Have a cup of coffee and a free glass of champagne every day.
Literally, I live on the opposite side of the river to your shop. I'm there twice a day.
Well, pop in, you won't regret.
Yeah, no, I won't regret. But so Aphroditi, darling, how are you? Are you okay now?
Perfect. And yourself, Suzanne?
I'm very well, thank you. Yes, I'm about to have an awful lot of children come back from school, but that's okay. I've got tons of them. I've got 5 kids, but that's okay.
5, wow.
Yeah, wow. It's okay. But they're about to come home, and then I'll have to think about food and hospitality. Because hospitality begins at home, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
That's a good ending.
Yes.
All of you, thank you so much. Thank you, Ed, Aphroditi, Tim. It's been an amazing time. I hope that our audience has enjoyed our ridiculous mumblings, but thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Bye,
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
See you later.